Good evening, everyone, and welcome to the first ever live fans forum where we take a deep delve into all things Formula One. And of course, what makes us unique here is we want you guys to be in pole position, driving the conversation. If you're joining us from elsewhere in the world outside of the UK, good morning, good afternoon, wherever you are. And thank you for joining us because we spent the last month or so really putting some energy in across the socials to build this community. And so it's great to see we've already got some engagement in the chat box and you guys joining in. I've got my VIP co-host with me and we're looking forward to getting into this first live show. We've seen across the socials, haven't we, in the world of Formula One, that the drivers are back in the gym. They're back at HQ. Some of them are out on circuit, a la Lewis Hamilton, and we're looking forward to 2025. But for this live launch show of Fans Forum, we're going to look at some of the winners and losers of the 2024 season. And as I said, I want your comments in the chat box, and to encourage you to do that, we're also running our revival racing competition. So you see this, you can look this good, right? All you need to do is engage in the chat box, and then at the end we've got a special draw we'll be doing. We'll show it live on the screen, and you could be winning £100 worth of vouchers for revival racing. Just a caveat though, this is actually the back of the t-shirt. This is part of the vintage collection. They got lots from the current grid as well, but it looks so cool that I had to wear it in reverse. All right. But listen, I've got a VIP co-host with me here today as well to bounce off of live. And it's none other than Deluded Ferrari Fan, Zaniolo. Zane, welcome and thank you for joining us.
Thank you so much. It's a pleasure to be part of the first episode of this. Really looking forward to it. And it's great to see so many people in the chat already.
Now, listen, dude, just first up, give us a quick overview of how you became a fan of Scuderriaferrari.
God. Well, I was basically born into it, I suppose. Basically, my uncle's a Deluded Ferrari fan and my granddad's a Deluded Ferrari fan as well. So I don't really have much choice going into it. You know, I could have, growing up, I could have picked who was winning at the time. I could have picked, you know, like a Button in that season, a Hamilton. But I thought, no. I can't disobey the tribe. And I had to follow the horse.
Brilliant stuff. Well, of course, we'll get into your team and we'll probably touch a little bit on Lewis Hamilton in red, but we're going to be running through the constructors in descending order from how they finished last year. And I know some fans are not really that interested in the constructors, but of course, it's where the prize money's handed out. $1.5 billion of it. So for yourself, Zane, are you that bothered or is it more about just a driver in red lifting the Drivers' Championship for you?
Well, I suppose the driver, everyone's got a soft spot for the driver. So you always want your driver to do well, to win the races. But at the end of the day, the winning comes from, you know, making the money in Formula One to be able to do better in the next years. So it's the biggest trophy, really. You know, as much as you like to discuss who's the GOAT, at the end of the day, it comes down to who's the best team.
Yeah, and of course, in an era of cost cap, every penny that comes in can matter for the following season, like you said, my man. But listen, look, let's get into how they finished last year and starting, of course, with these two boys, McLaren. I mean, Zane, did you see it? When you think about it, I think they only won one race in the first 12 of the season. So for them to actually lift the constructors is a huge achievement, isn't it?
Yeah, honestly, something that I wasn't looking forward to seeing. When they first started doing well this season, I thought, oh no, it's just going to be a little blip, a good couple races here and there. But don't worry, they're not going to win anything. Look how it ended up. As soon as they had the most dominant car, they just took it off and just ran with it. Having two good drivers as well has proven really valuable too.
Yeah, I was going to ask you about the driver lineup of Lando Norris and Oscar Piastri. Would you say it's the strongest lineup on the grid of last year and potentially 2025 as well?
No, I'll be honest. I think they were very much helped by the car. They had like one of the most amazing cars, but you did notice on some race weekends, they had the best cars, but not always the best performances. Sometimes drivers in slower cars were even overtaking them. You know, we've seen this happen from the Ferrari, Redbull, and even Mercedes at some point as well. But I think at the end of the day, they just had the sheer strength behind them in that car, which pushed them to the very end.
And looking at the chat box, some of the guys in there, I just wondered, How do you feel out there, fans? Are you interested in the Constructors' Championship, or is it more about your favorite driver winning? Let us know in the chat box. And remember, we want that engagement because we've got the prize draw at the end where you could win. So let us know. We've got Backflip Ben who's saying Ferrari will win the Constructors this year. So I'm sure Zane will be very happy with that one. But listen, turning it back to McLaren, Zane. Lando Norris, what a performance. He took it pretty much to the end of the season against Max Verstappen. What do you think for next year? Is it all to do with his relationship with Oscar as well?
I think you've definitely got to talk about that, especially when the papaya rules come into place as well, because you look at the driver lineup, and as much as you want to say that maybe Lando's, the slightly preferred one, the more priority, for me, they're very much neck and neck. So it's going to be hard to sort of manage that relationship with them.
I've seen a great comment from Lou Bell as well. Got to love a flexi wing. So what do we make about the flexi? They labeled it as a mini or double DRS, didn't they? And they withdrew it themselves eventually. Do you think that helped them along the way?
It's got to have, surely. You know what I mean? I think when I first heard of it, I'll be honest, my first thought was, damn, I wish we thought of that beforehand. But then, you know how it works.
And so what would you give them overall for the season, McLaren, for 2024, Zane? Overachievers, underachievers, or about right? I think I know what you're going to say.
I sort of want to be, very level-headed and say about right. But I think with the car that they had, they should have ran away with it. So I'm going to say underachievers.
Wow. Okay. Even in the first half of the season, because I think the car really only came into its peak after the summer break, right? And we've got short memories.
Yeah, no, it is true. I remember the first, the first 7 races when Verstappen was running away from it. Running away with it. I thought, oh God, here we go again. It's going to be a repeat of the past 2 years. But then their car was a lot faster than the rest of the grid at some certain points of the season. You've got to wonder how they didn't just run away with it straight away.
So Zane not giving McLaren the props, maybe that some of you guys in the chat box think that they are due. They'll be interested to get your opinions.
It's very hard to get a compliment from McLaren out of me.
Well, listen, Zane, what we're going to do now is, of course, turn our attention to your two boys from the 2024 season, representing the Scuderriaferrari. They're absolutely passionate about this team, aren't you? And I know many in red are. P2 in the Constructors this season, which is an improvement on 2023. Are you happy with that as a Ferrari fan?
I'm content. I would say there were moments of the season where I was thinking, surely the Constructors is ours. But then when I think about at the very beginning of the season, where we've been in the past couple of years, we can't complain with P2. We've got to be honest. As much as I'd like to be P1, I still see Ferrari sort of on the journey, which hopefully this year in 2026 and 2027, even we'll be able to see some improvements. But the 2024 season, I was fairly content.
What did you make when Fred Vasseur came in? And were you surprised that Matteo Binotto was parted ways with? And how much of this rise that Ferrari seems to be on now is down to Vasseur?
Yeah, I'll be honest. I knew that Binotto was going to be going more or less. The way that the Scuderia was going, I was thinking it's just a matter of time before this guy goes. And I was expecting, to be honest, I don't really know what I was expecting. When Fred Vasseur came in, I think...
Not the guy from Alfa Romeo.
You know what I mean? I was thinking like me and sort of basically every other Ferrari. I was thinking, oh, is that it? I was expecting, something like some massive revolutionary news for some like guy to come in and take, being like team principal of Ferrari by the grip of the neck and just being completely crazy with it. And when he came in, I was thinking, oh, I don't really feel like we're, very competitive. But I feel like it's just a different approach, something that we haven't really been used to with Ferrari as well. Because you look back at our history, which is full of people that are thinking, yeah, we're Ferrari, we're going to beat everyone, we're the ones dressed in red. But in reality, I think with Vasseur, it's been interesting to sort of, take a step back. He's been able to look at the sport and, our team with a very level head, see where we can improve, not expecting us to be like the fastest in qualifying and have the best race pace every weekend. But, he's thought very rationally, and I think that slowly brought us to where we are now.
It seems that you guys have gone for the opposite strategy compared to a lot of the grid, in a sense of there's a new rise of team principals that seem to have an engineering background. But with Fred,
Yeah.
you've gone more for the people manager, and that seems to be working out for you guys at the moment, doesn't it?
Yeah, no, 100%. I think, as I say, in Ferrari, that's something that we need at the moment. We need the man management.
So I just want to head over to the chat box real quick and give a shout out to Felix Kling, who is saying that he only cares about the Drivers' Championship. So the conversation we was discussing earlier, I'm pretty sure though, Felix, that the teams and their bank balance would be very concerned with the constructors, as we mentioned before. And then Naj is engaged about this Ferrari conversation, Zane, just saying that he can't believe that Carlos is no longer with Ferrari. We've got to spend a bit of time talking about Carlos Sainz. How much do we have to respect him for the fact that he still got his head down and performed even after the big announcement about Lewis Hamilton?
100%. And the craziest thing for me was that this announcement was made in February last year. So it wasn't sort of like, last couple races, he was thinking, okay, I've only got a couple last races. He had the whole season ahead of him pretty much before he knew that he was going to be leaving Ferrari. So I think you've really got to respect him and the work ethic, and not even just, driving for himself and Ferrari, but driving for his teammate as well. There's been so many times this season where he's actually been, very selfless, which I was actually really taken aback by. I don't know if I would have been able to do the same.
Yeah, I did see a really nice touch from Ferrari. They gave him a car, and there was a whole feature that I saw online. Him and his dad got to race off against each other. So even that, I think it showed how much the team actually valued him. And, behind the scenes, we don't know what happened. We don't know who approached who with regards to Ferrari and Lewis Hamilton. But when a 7-time world champion is offered, you have to listen and begin a conversation. And like you said, for Carlos, not to get down in the dumps or throw his toys out of the pram and perform is something to really respect. What about the other side of the garage, though? Charles Leclerc, how happy was he last season? I don't feel we saw the same guy that we saw in 2023, did we?
Yeah, I mean, with Leclerc, it's always sort of, it always seems like the same story that, he's seeming like that they're investing so much into him. And, that is the situation, I suppose. That's why we've kept him as opposed to Sainz, because we've just invested in him for the future. And I think that he's sort of aware that he's on the journey with Ferrari at this point as well. Like, as I said before, Ferrari aren't just, expecting to be World Championship tomorrow. Like, as much as I like to say that, realistically, we can't expect that. So I think he's aware that he's slowly on the journey and he's going to have the highs and the lows. And with Ferrari's had very, very good highs, with 3 of his wins this year and 2 really significant ones. And there has been some lows, not just this year, but in the previous years as well.
Yeah, of course, Charles delivering in both Monaco and Monza for the Tifosi. Is there anything in the back of his mind, though, after this Lewis Hamilton announcement that perhaps he may not be the complete golden boy that we knew he was before that announcement? Do you think something like that's going on in Charles's head?
It's a tricky one, isn't it? It's a tricky one. I think if you're in his shoes, it's really hard not to think like that. Imagine, imagine you're a chef, for example, and you're just, you're doing well, everyone's loving your food, and then Gordon Ramsay walks in.
Right.
It's a similar concept, you know what I mean? I think it'll be hard not to think like, oh God, this guy's after all the glory, he's after all the victories now. So I think it'll be hard for him not to think that, but if he tries to think level-headed, like he's been forced to do so many times in the past couple of years, I think he will know that he's at a completely different point in his career compared to Lewis. So that should be sort of his golden, his light at the end of the tunnel of this.
And for you, really, the last few years, let's say post Vettel leaving Ferrari, this has been Charles's team and the development of the car, etc. He would be very much leading that, wouldn't he? And in theory, really, I guess Lewis is almost jumping into his group.
Yeah, and I think it's expected that in the past the first few races, Lewis, I can't see him winning. I think even in the testing, it's been reported that he hasn't been doing amazing. He's crashed the car already, which is, not the most promising sign. So I think it's going to be a slow process for him, especially with his history. He's been driving in, McLaren for so many years and the Mercedes for so many years. We can't really expect him to come in and flip the switch like that. So I think it's going to be a bit of a process, and it's going to feel like he's just joining the team. But at the end of the day, I think that's one of the reasons why we've actually agreed to sign Hamilton, because he's one of them drivers that he builds the team. Not just, he doesn't tell everyone what to do. He's not the driver and he just races. He helps build the team. He helps, develop the car, which is something, one of the reasons why we brought him in.
Yeah, some people in the chat box agreeing with you, saying Richie Smith 696 just saying that it's all about Lewis and leading him towards 2026 and consolidating to back Lewis for a championship push. Very interesting there. But listen, Zane, we need to move it forward off of your beloved Scuderriaferrari. But for 2024, what would you say? Overachieve, just about right, or underachieve with a P2 in the Constructors' Championship? It's a position up, right, on 2023.
It is a position up. It is a position up. And you know what? I probably will say overachieved, because if you was to tell me P2 at the beginning of last year, I'd have said, you know what? I'll accept that. However, I will say this year I'm expecting P1 and nothing less.
Brilliant. I must say that surely has come through red tinted glasses. The first two, we've gone Ferrari overachieved in P2, but McLaren underachieved in P1. I absolutely love it.
I don't know what you expected, to be honest.
Right. So listen, Zane, let's move it forward and talk about the team who can boast the Drivers' World Champion for the last 4 seasons. But as a team, I mean, 2023, for the first time in their history, securing P1 and P2 in the championship and the Constructors' title, but P3 in the Constructors in 2024. I mean, how? When Max won 7 of the first 10 races of the season. How has that happened?
Crazy, isn't it? Crazy, isn't it? I think that just really shows the importance of having 2 competitive drivers.
What happened to Sergio Perez for you? It was, I think, 4 out of 5 podiums in the first 5 races of the season, and then none for the rest of it. It was like he signed a contract renewal, and then when, like many of us possibly would go, fantastic, brilliant.
Yeah. No, it was crazy, isn't it? Especially because, even following Perez from back in the day, 2012, I've always really rated him as a driver. I've always thought he's very, very consistent, very solid. And to be fair, even 2022, he was decent in my opinion. 2023, he was okay. But this year, I've got no idea. Maybe he's been cursed or something, but it's been funny to see.
And if we talk about things behind the scenes as well, we mentioned McLaren's mini DRS. Let's talk about the mechanics ride height button that they had in the Red Bull. And I think similarly, it was around about midway through the season after this fantastic start that someone saw this button and they were like, oh no, that's just for the mechanics when we're adjusting the car. What did you make of that story?
It's one of them stories that make you laugh. And it's funny how the funniest stories in Formula One come from all the mechanical sides of it.
Yeah.
But yeah, no, I suppose it's just, as I say, it makes me laugh. And I think, it really shows how fine edge that the mechanics side of it is. You know what I mean? Like they're trying to push the very limit to try and implement these, fine details to try and get the, a centimeter ahead of the other car. And, it's just, I like to see it. I personally like to see it because I just find it so interesting outside of the sport. And it's just good to see when there's like, arguments involved with it as well.
Well, this is obviously the top end of engineering and science. And how I like to think about it is that the regulations, these top minds just think, okay, how can I interpret that and get round it without actually breaking these rules? It's like the ultimate semantics, isn't it?
Exactly. No, it's great to see. I always love to see them, new stories come up on my page.
Big shout to Nadj, who's back in the chat box, just saying that Max Verstappen's performance in Brazil was absolutely amazing. Yeah, it was a fantastic performance, somewhat helped by the weather, though. You know what I mean? It was kind of like it was just a calamity for everyone around. But I guess even to keep his head amongst all of that, we really have to pay respects to Max Verstappen. Where does he sit with you, Zane, with regards to the greatest ever? Do we have to talk about him in the same vein as the likes of Lewis Hamilton, Michael Schumacher, etc. now?
You know what? I made I think a TikTok or Instagram video a while ago discussing my top 5. And I saw so many shouts with Verstappen in there. And, it's something that I've never really considered because in my head, he's still 16 years old. I don't know about you. But when you look back at his career, 4 championships are 4 championships. You know what I mean? That's when you start to enter into that debate. So for me, dare I say top 5?
Well, I think if he wins next season, that puts him equal with Schumacher, right, with 5 in a row. And then that's 5 world championships. I saw an amazing stat that races that he's finished, he hasn't finished outside the points since he was 18 years old.
What?
Yeah, so he is a phenomenal driver. We know that his dad has been coaching him literally since he was a toddler. He was destined to be this driver. But also, I guess it's about what's going on behind the scenes at Red Bull. It feels like there's a bit of an end of a dynasty. Adrian Newey's moved on. It doesn't seem like all is well. Do you think that they can recover next season, Zane, or are they going to be on a bit of a downward spiral maybe for the next chapter now, Red Bull?
Yeah, I do see it as sort of, like the glory days coming to an end for Red Bull, which, we sort of saw in the Vettel period, if you just think back not too long ago, to be honest, how that sort of happened over a wave of, 4 or 5 years. And then they sort of settled for the sort of P3, but then they were just back like that. And that's just where that Formula One works. Personally, I think that this year, we're not going to see them as competitive as the past couple of years. But then again, you never know. 2026 coming around, 2025 this year, you never really know.
Yeah, with the 2026 regulations, it's going to be like a whole system reset for everyone.
I mean, yeah, you've got no idea.
And there's some big, bright minds that have moved in and around Formula One behind the scenes. So it'll be interesting to see what teams flourish. And we're going to talk about Aston Martin in a bit, but we know how much money they've invested behind the scenes to bring home a championship at some point. I'm going to move it forwards now. So actually, before I do, Red Bull, what would you say for a season? Underachievers, overachievers, or just about right?
I think you've got to say underachievers, surely. Given the way that they started, I think with Verstappen winning, I think he's definitely overachieved. But when we're talking about constructors, some eyebrows have got to be raised and said, maybe not so.
And also the fact that 2023, it was a clean sweep for them, wasn't it? Drivers and drivers P1 and P2 and the constructors. So this season, it was a drivers P1 and P8 and then third in the constructors. So that's quite a fall from grace for Red Bull. But I'm sure Red Bull fans out there will feel perhaps with the backing of Liam Lawson, they can push onwards and upwards for next season. Let's turn our attention then, Zane, to the Silver Arrows, Mercedes. Now, of course, try not to be biased because I know that you love Lewis Hamilton now. But performance last year for the Silver Arrows, how do you feel it went for them?
I think it was very much a turning point year for them. I think they started the year, not on the best foot. And you did see some marks of progress. I think there was even a point where they was even faster than the Ferrari. I think it was slightly after the summer break, might be mistaken. But yeah, as I say, definitely much a turning point for them. And I think this year, they can accept that. So they would have slightly underachieved, in my opinion. However, I think that going ahead, they should be confident.
We talked as well, didn't we, off camera a little while ago, just saying about understanding their car. They came out mid-season and said that the calibration of the wind tunnel wasn't quite right. And the latter half of the season, they put some good performances together. 4 race wins, in fact, across the whole of 2024, which was an improvement on last season. If they can understand that development, George Russell has shown that he's got performance in there. He put in the perfect weekend in Vegas this season just gone. And he beat the 7-time world champion 2 out of the 3 seasons that they raced together. So and let me ask you a question about George. Where does George sit with regards to talent in the current grid for you?
I really rate George, to be honest. It might sound funny coming from a Ferrari fan, but I really think he's a good driver, really talented. And he sort of got that, he oozes that sort of championship material, if you know what I mean. I feel like he really has, the qualities to go really right up to the top.
So like a classy demeanor you feel that George has got. And for you ready to lead the Mercedes team with the rookie coming in, Antonelli?
It'll be interesting with Antonelli. I think he featured in one race this year, and I think he did show some signs of almost, immaturity, but which is fair enough. You know what I mean? He's only 17 years old. He's only got his driver's license last week. So I think it's going to be interesting with them. I'm really gonna, as much as I like to be like, I only want Ferrari to win. I only want Ferrari to do well. There's a little part of me that wants to see both the drivers do well because, they're really likable drivers. And I think that they're both really talented as well. So it'd be good to see them do well.
Some great engagement with the chat box, guys. Thank you so much. And remember, all of you that are constantly engaging, you are entered into our Revival Racing competition. You could look as good as this Schumacher vintage stuff. Ayrton Senna's another one that I've got, but there's also stuff from the current grid, and we'll do that draw at the end once we've run through all of the constructors. People diving in, talking about Backflip Ben saying that Red Bull right to get rid of Perez. Lou Bell is talking about Yuki not getting the second seat at Red Bull and that he should have got it. And then Naj coming back and saying, why did they pick Liam over him? We'll get into that with you, Zane, in a little while, of course. Just finally, on Mercedes, before we go for overachieve, underachieve, or just about right, Hamilton, his performance, I mean, across Grand Prix was pretty solid in a sense of he rectified what had gone wrong earlier in the weekend. But, I mean, are you concerned as a Ferrari fan with his one-lap pace? Because qualifying, he come out in the press conference at times and just in the pen and just said, yeah, it wasn't good enough. I made a mistake. Yeah, I was slow. Yeah, I didn't get it right. How do you feel about his qualifying performance this year, Zane?
Yeah, it has been a little bit worrying, hasn't it? I think, when drivers get to a certain age, maybe you can start worrying that they're just getting old. But then, you look at him, I think there's a stat about his reaction time. It's the fastest on the grid at his age. It's still the fastest on the grid. So maybe is it just a blip? Maybe is he just getting out of touch with the Mercedes car and needs to change? I really hope it's not a question of talent at this point, of him getting old or, just losing talent and the others are getting better. So I can only pray, to be honest. I can only pray.
From a Ferrari perspective, yes. We have to remember as well, though, and we were all made aware of this when we were watching the broadcasts, that when it was announced that Lewis would be leaving Mercedes, past the mid-season point, all of a sudden there'll be meetings that he's left out of. He won't be consulted on development of the car. So from being pivotal to everything that team did, he will have been on the peripheries in the second half of the season. So we have to consider that a little, although it'll be interesting to see when he goes into Ferrari, how they're going to merge all of that. We already talked about it. We won't go into it again, but yeah, merging that now is the guy that put, was it 10% on your share price overnight when he signed?
Like, yeah.
They said, like, with the share price of Ferrari, they could have bought him 50 times with what he did overnight.
Yeah, something's crazy like that.
Yeah. Just having a look at the chat box as well. I'd love to keep you guys engaged. Richie Smith 696 is saying, who was the better driver out of George and Lewis over the past 3 seasons? Did George score more points? Do you know anything about this, Zane? I mean, I do know how this panned out.
Has George done better?
Yeah, let me feed you in then. So over the 3 seasons, Zane, Lewis scored more points collectively, but George beat Lewis in season 1 and season 3 with regards to points.
Right.
So I think there was just a big gulf in season 2. I don't know if you can recall, there was a moment where George went a bit off the boil, didn't he? And he said that he had to go back and reevaluate, and he was putting too much pressure on himself and almost get it back to basics. So I don't know whether you could say it's almost 50-50 with them as teammates. But for you, Zane, as a team, the Silver Arrows, did they overachieve, underachieve, or just about right in 2024?
I think with the resources that they had, just about right.
Okay, so P4 in the constructors for 24. And of course, that will mean they get plenty more access to CFD and wind tunnel time, which could again be pivotal for their performance during the 2025 season. Let's push it forwards. Let's now take a look at probably, would I say that the team on the grid with the biggest pockets? I mean, I'm not well versed on all the dynamics of the financials of Formula One, but we know that Lawrence Stroll has got very deep pockets. He's putting his money where his mouth is.
Yeah.
And his son is still in a seat. How do you feel they got on last season? Was 2023 a little bit of luck, or do they just need a bit of better guidance a la Adrian Newey coming in? What do you think, Zane?
Yeah, that's what I mean. I think the past couple of years, especially this year, they've had all the money. They've had all the money to be able to get the resources, but they just don't have the sort of the intel behind it. I think that's sort of what separated them from, leading the midfield to not quite breaking into the top teams. So it'll be interesting with Adrian Newey. I think that's going to be something to really keep an eye on this year. I think that's going to be probably one of the biggest stories. That how are Aston Martin going to do?
Yeah, because of course he's had no real impact on the car that they will drive in 25. Because if you're watching there and you don't know, the Formula One teams start developing their car for next season, the previous season. So Newey only joined in the last couple of months to Aston Martin, but I'm sure he will accelerate, Zane, development across this 2025 season that's upcoming. But for 2024, Aston Martin, at times, Lance Stroll seemed so disinterested. And I know we only get the media bit. So maybe he's just disinterested in the media. But how long do these big names behind the scenes that have come in for success, how long do they toe the line with regards to, for want of a better word, the manager's son being in a seat?
Yeah, I was literally having this conversation with another content creator the other week. It's a funny one with Lance Stroll, and something that we haven't really seen too often in Formula One. What's his end game going to be? Is he just going to be there until he retires, or is he going to eventually get fired one day, and then is he just going to become is the company going to get inherited to him, and he's going to put his son in the seat as well? It's a really funny one with Lance Stroll. You're right. This year he really hasn't been on it. At some points, he really did seem sort of like as if Formula One was just just like his hobby that he does on the weekends, and and that was it.
Yeah, only 6 points finishes across the whole season. And even Fernando Alonso went off the boil, but I saw an article with him the other day saying that he's always been racing with cars inferior to the competition. But at the start of 2023, they did phenomenally, didn't they? And it was 8 podiums they got across the season in 23. This season, 24, just gone, none. So something has happened at Aston Martin.
Yeah, no, 100%, 100%. Especially because I definitely remember last year as well, in the first couple of races, when Verstappen was running with it, and I was thinking, oh, surely not again. And then when I saw, Fernando Alonso behind me, I was thinking, oh, is Fernando Alonso going to be the one that stops this Max Verstappen dynasty? But it's great to see how quick they've just, switched from going from that sort of height in beginning of 2023 to where they are now when they sort of finish the season. And I don't know, do you start to ask questions about the car itself or the drivers?
For you, Fernando Alonso, how long can he pull off the Peter Pan act as well? He's going to be, is it 44 midway through this upcoming season? And I look at him and think, how are you doing that? That's only a couple of years older than me. Oops.
Honestly, I think my kids are still going to be around to watch him race. Probably maybe my grandkids as well at this point. I don't know. Did I hear reports saying that next year's going to be his last year, or this year's going to be his last year?
But he wants to drive a newie car, from what I've seen, and so that's why he's holding out, which might give him the extra. But it's good to see in the chat people are throwing their 2 pence in on this. And Backflip Ben, love to see Alonso do well. Got to hand it to him at 43 years old. And then someone saying Stroll is on a gravy train, from Richie Smith 696. Lou Bell, Daddy's money. Stroll is a classic case of nepotism from FDB. I mean, yeah, people going in on Lance Stroll, but listen, he could prove us all wrong this season. Maybe Aston Martin are behind the scenes working on something fantastic as a machine, and Lance will pull it through. But they finished P5 again, Zane. 186 points less than 2023, though. So it really, the share of points has fell in their favor, that they managed to maintain where they were. But for you, underachieve, overachieve, or just about right?
Yeah, it's a tough one, because if you're trying to compare them to their last season, but then they're still top of the midfield. Their competition, the people
best
behind
of the
them,
rest.
Yeah, what I mean, they've managed to beat the rest of them. But considering where they were last year, considering the amount of money that they've splashed into that car, I've got to say underachieve.
Okay, fair enough. Let's push it forwards and talk about the team that represents the great nation of France, Alpine, of course, part of the Renault family, and the double act in 2024 that was Esteban Ocon and Pierre Gasly. Was it ever going to work for you, Zane? These two, we knew that, I don't want to use the word frosty, but they've been competitors through junior series, and they used to be best buddies, but then really fell out, apparently. And then going toe-to-toe, there were some big incidents. There was a huge one in Australia in 23, and then this year in Monaco as well, they collided, and Ocon had to retire, I believe. And Ocon had to retire, and he took a lot of stick, I think, from fans and internally.
Yeah, I think they were quite comical this year, weren't they? I think Monaco definitely made me laugh a little bit when I saw the give and take that they had.
On lap one as well, not even like letting it calm down.
It really made me laugh at some point. And as sort of like a non-Alpine fan, I've got to be honest, loved it. Loved the laughs, loved the drama. But I think if you're Alpine, it is a little bit embarrassing, isn't it? Especially, when you've got a driver lineup that should be representing your home nation. You think that maybe that would be the extra passion behind the team to sort of push them above the rest. But it just really didn't work out, did it?
Yeah, both race winners. If they could have got on, I think for the level of the team, it was a great acquisition for both
Yeah.
drivers. But it was always a big if whether they were going to get on. And remember, this team has won world championships in its mould as Renault and Benetton. It feels, though, that maybe there's a little pullback on investment. We know they had a power unit that was inferior to the rest of the grid. We know they're going to change that in 2026. Even the whole thing, if we look forward just ever so slightly, Jack Doohan coming into the second seat there surprised a lot of people that they haven't tried to bring in a bigger name. What do you make of what's going on behind the scenes at Alpine and their future in Formula One generally, Zane?
Yeah, I think it's quite hard to tell, isn't it? Especially with the Jack Doohan coming in. It's interesting, but then pretty much I think 80% of people that I've spoken to about this are saying, oh yeah, he's going to be gone after, 5 races. I'd say keep an eye on Colapinto.
It felt harsh, didn't it? They announced Doohan and then literally, was it a week later, announced Colapinto as their reserve driver. They got all the rumour mill going about what kind of deal that Jack Doohan's got. But don't rule him out, and he's been part of that Alpine family and academy for a long, long time. We know that Oscar Piastri was a part of their academy and very famously didn't end up racing for Alpine, possibly cost Otmar Szafnauer his job. I almost feel, though, that the whole scenario that's going on there, it's like they've almost got karma from when they stole Daniel Ricciardo from Red Bull, because they were so smug about it for Drive to Survive fans who remember it out there. And then since then, it's like they've been getting screwed by everybody.
Yeah, and it has been the past couple of years for Renault Alpine fans, I suppose, hasn't it?
And then you've got a driver who then goes and has a seat fitting at Williams, apparently, and forgets to turn his GPS tracker off. And I think that was the end of Esteban Ocon at Alpine. But they managed to secure P6 in the Constructors, Zane, fortuitously, because they got that double podium in Brazil. So I think the season could have looked a lot worse. But for you, as a team, the Renault family, underachieve, overachieve, or just about right?
Yeah, you're right. With that result, the double podium, that really pushed them. I think if it wasn't for that, they would have been in big trouble this year. And I think for me, Brazil was a massive anomaly. It was, sort of the craziest race I've seen in the past 5 years. So ruling that out, I'm gonna have to say underachievers.
It'll be interesting to see what happens there this season. Gasly being tasked with leading the team and a young rookie alongside him. Naj just saying, Colapinto is so funny. His poor PR team. I think maybe Jack Doohan's PR team or Colapinto's, in a sense of that he's sitting around waiting for a race seat when is it 4 or 5 rookies that are in the upcoming season? There's a hell of a lot of new rookies coming in, and somehow Colapinto still didn't manage to get a seat. And Lou Bell's saying that Alpine using a Mercedes engine is a disaster. I think, when you're supposed to be a works team, I would absolutely agree there, Lou. We're going to push it forward with you then, Zane, and talk about, one of the performances of the year, from my personal opinion, the combination of Hülkenberg and Magnussen at Haas. And we have to start, Zane. I don't know about you, but I have to eat huge humble pie. I remember the alert coming through on my phone that Haas have parted ways with Gunther Steiner, possibly as more of a Drive to Survive fan than an F1 fan, and that Ayo Komatsu was coming in, and we all went, oh, why have they done that? Because Gunther Steiner was so good for their presence and marketing. But look what's happened. It's their best season since 2018, I believe.
Yeah, 100%. Haas has really surprised me this well.
What did you make of that decision to let Gunther Steiner go? Were you the same, or were you like, something needs to change?
I was shocked, to be honest. I really didn't think that, because he had a vision as well. He sort of lived and breathed Haas. He was sort of, you think of Haas and you thought of him. You didn't think of the drivers back in the day. So I was really shocked to see him go. But obviously it's paid off, so I can't really criticize the decision, can I?
Yeah, Komatsu was head of trackside ops beforehand. So again, it's following this theme of having someone who really knows his stuff rather than someone who, can just manage people. And Komatsu as well, being Japanese, possibly the extra investment that's going to come into that team now. And you'll know that they are a customer of your beloved Ferrari, and a large portion of that car is designed elsewhere. But I know that Toyota are now very interested in working with them holistically, and there's already some kind of deal that's gone on. But the team is kind of split. I think there's some of them that are in the UK, some are in the US, some are in Italy. Do they need to change that for you? That must be very difficult trying to command a team across 3 different time zones.
Yeah, exactly. It really must be very hard to operate with. You know what I mean? I think it's got to be something that they'll eventually sort out. You know what I mean? You can't really carry on a team like that. And the way that I see Haas on the upwards trajectory, I think, they'll sort that out soon. And I think keep an eye on them. You know what I mean?
What do you make of the decision not to keep either driver? I mean, I think perhaps Hulkenberg's head was turned because of joining the Audi outfit eventually as a German. But do you think maybe they should have done more to definitely keep the Hulk, or at least keep Magnussen on, who's already embedded in the team, and then add somebody else? What did you make of that decision?
Yeah, I thought it was a bit of a crazy decision to get rid of them and just get, 2 new drivers in, especially because if you remember the last time that Haas did this, the last time that Haas decided to get 2 new drivers in, sort of Schumacher and Mazepin, and that didn't end up very well, if you remember. So yeah, shocking. Not something that I would have personally recommended. But then at the same time, they're in my opinion, they're 2 talented drivers coming in. Ocon, who's got experience with him, but he's still got, the rest of his career ahead of him too. And Ollie Behrman, I think that's going to be something that's going to be very exciting. Everyone's going to be keeping an eye on him this year.
Looking at the chat box, people just engaging a little bit there with regards to the rookies. So Naj correcting me, there are 6 rookies on the grid for next season, which is exciting, and it needed to happen because in 2024 we had none, remember? And I mean, I look at my personal perspective, I feel that there should be some kind of golden handshake that comes with the F2 champion, because you shouldn't end up with the likes of Piastri and Felipe Drugovich, won F2, 3 seasons ago, and it's just sitting there. I mean, there should be some way that the pathway continues, and at the moment that doesn't exist. So 6 rookies in this season, I'm very much looking forward to. But turning it back to Haas, one of the almost rookies, Ollie Behrman, is coming in. People are excited about him, particularly from the Ferrari family. Is he going to get on with Ocon? Is Ocon going to calm it down now he is the more experienced driver for you, Zane?
Yeah, I think the better way to ask it is Ocon going to get along with Ollie Behrman? You know what I mean? Ollie seems, sort of very easygoing. He can get along with anyone. Like, he wouldn't even hurt a fly. Then Ocon's sort of, just like the sort of person that you wouldn't want to be stuck in an elevator with. You know what I mean? So I think it's going to be tough. Especially, I'm going to feel, that Ollie's going to be in a situation where he's going to want to be learning stuff as well. Coming into his first, Formula One season as an official driver. He's going to be looking not to win the championship, obviously, but to learn as much as possible. And I think with Ocon, he might encounter a couple of obstacles on his way, put it that way.
Experienced drivers are always getting on well with rookies as long as they're beating them, in my experience. Their nose tends to get put out of joint when the young buck oversteps his mark, shall we say. And of course, in F1, you always, at the very least, have to beat your teammate, because that's the only guy with the same equipment as you. So Haas for you, I think I know what you're going to say, Zane, but overachieve, underachieve, or just about right? P7 for 2024.
Yep, decent year. I think they've really overachieved. They've really overachieved this year.
Yeah, I would absolutely agree. What about you guys in the chat box? How do you think Haas got on in 2024? Were you surprised that they did so well? Were you a big fan of Gunther Steiner, perhaps, and were gutted not to see more of him on the grid, although he's doing the evening talks now, isn't he? So if you're a real fan, you can just go and book a ticket of that instead. Turning our attention to Racing Bulls, RB, Visa, Cash App, Mini, Red Bull, however we want to label and call them. For this little screenshot, I wanted to make it a 3-way because, of course, this is the team that's supposed to feed into the main Red Bull team. And my first question I want to ask you, Zane, with that in mind, what was the point of the Daniel Ricciardo move in 2024 for you?
Yeah, it was an odd one. And for me, that whole... I don't even want to repeat their whole team name, so I'm just going to say that team. For me, which is one big question mark this year. I think the reason why they exist, sort of, I would say, feed into the Red Bull team. was sort of contradicted. Daniel Ricciardo, as much as I like him as a driver, like, definitely one of my favorites. Growing up with him, it's been amazing. But it was a hard watch at some points, and some of the moves, in my opinion, didn't make a lot of sense, especially regarding the end with keeping Yuki there and bringing Lawson up to Red Bull.
Yeah.
That was a bit of a funny one. Also, for me personally, the Lawson replacing Ricciardo move, that was a move that was inevitably going to happen. For me, I'm surprised it didn't happen earlier, to be honest.
Yeah, Ricciardo seemed to be living off of reputation rather than performance for a couple of seasons, didn't he? And like we remember very well that, I don't want to use the word, but I will, like the annihilation that Lando Norris was serving to him at McLaren, and it became hard to watch. And
very hard.
Yeah, and eventually they parted ways as well. Let's talk about, you mentioned the Liam Lawson move to Red Bull for next season. What did you make of Yuki Tsunoda, who led the team gallantly, really, last year and outperformed both Ricciardo and Lawson when Lawson came in? Why do you think that they've overlooked Yuki Tsunoda at Red Bull, Zane?
I've got no answer. I've got no idea. Honestly, I was really surprised when I learned that it was going to be Liam Lawson going there, especially when you look at performance, when you look at experience. 10 people out of 10 would have told you that it should have been Yuki going there. So honestly, mate, I've got no answers for you on this one.
Well, we put a poll out, and a lot of people fed back saying it was more about character with Yuki. And I guess in the second seat at Red Bull, you have to understand that you are entering Max's team, right? And you are there to support Max winning the World Championship. I mean, I can't say this for sure, but I mean, as we look from the outside, that's how it feels. And you've just got to provide that support. Maybe they thought that Yuki's somewhat fiery character couldn't do that, but it's still a shame not to give him the opportunity.
Yeah, at the end of the day, he's a very fast driver and he's a very talented driver. And yeah, I suppose you're right. That's the sort of the only argument that can get into my head of why he didn't get that seat. But then, Liam Lawson, who's not to say that he'll be the same? Who's not to say that after 6 months he's sick and tired of being pushed to number 2? He wants to sort of push to the front as well. I think it just depends on how that depends on how he's going to be doing in the first few races as well. But it's a very interesting dynamic, isn't it?
Isn't it a bit unrealistic as well? Maybe Sergio Perez overperformed at points because we know how much that car is developed around Max's very unique driving style. And there's a very famous clip of Alex Albon talking about how sensitive Max has the car. And so everybody else has to adapt to that. Liam Lawson, what did he do for you that meant he got that second seat at Red Bull?
Yeah, I think when Horner did discuss, why it was when he gave his explanation as to why he chose Lawson, he did go very much into details of sort of his driving style, his performance, the way that he drives the car, as opposed to his performance compared to Yuki Tsunoda, who's faster in that car. So I think maybe he's just looking at it from that point of view, that maybe the car that he's built for Max Verstappen is more adapt to Liam Lawson.
Yeah, maybe they are looking at the data, which of course all of us don't have access to. So it's a very good point there. Felix Kling saying this team needs a new management without Helmut Marko and the RB guys. So I think maybe the overarching Red Bull Racing, including Racing Bulls as well. But we know there's a power struggle behind the scenes, don't we? With Christian Horner, there's the part Thai owners that are involved, and yet there's Helmut Marko. We don't know who's involved with Dietrich Mateschitsch's family. Are they still involved with it as well? There's so many elements anyway, and so many people that want to take their part of the pie at the Red Bull family. Now, Richie Smith saying Daniel Ricciardo is a top chap and he wished he'd achieved more, but the money move to Renault was possibly his biggest achievement. So, yeah, we agree. Sorry, I should say I agree. What do you make of that, Zane? He took the money, right? When he could have gone toe-to-toe with Max. Do you think he just went, I can't, and said, so let me go and get paid? Or do you think he just looked at the money?
Yeah, I've never really thought that. I've always seen it as sort of like a money move for him, but maybe he was threatened by Max. He's the sort of driver that you don't really want as your teammate particularly as well, is it?
Yeah, we mentioned earlier this idea the experienced guys are okay until the young guy starts beating them. And then when you show them up, they get very embarrassed. But let's look at Racing Bulls, Visa, Cash App, VCarb, RB as a 2024 performance for you, Zane. Underachieve, overachieve, or just about right? P8 in the championship.
P8 sounds low, but I think with the resources that they had, I think it's just about right.
Yeah, okay. I know that they did talk about as well wanting to have a bit more of a marriage with the senior team, and so I guess we'll see how that works out in the next couple of seasons. Another rookie, Isaac Hadja, in the second seat there next season. So who knows what kind of contract he's got when we're talking about these rookies and how long they will last. Let's move our attention now, Zane, to Williams. Of course, a huge name in the history of Formula One, but they went through a pretty barren time more recently, and then Doralton Capital came in and invested heavily, and then last season finished in P7, which is one of their best performances for some time. But this season there was the whole melee with Logan Sargent midway through. What did you make of that? What did you make of Logan Sargent initially getting that second seat, and then how they dealt with removing him from it?
Yeah, I think Logan Sargent in Williams, for me, was sort of unexpected. I wasn't really shocked by it. It sort of seemed like the sort of move that I would have been expecting from Williams. And I think, at the end of the day, it just came down to his performance compared to Alex Albon. In my opinion, he had a pretty good year this year, really pushing the team to its limit. He did some really crazy overtakes. One of the best ones that I've seen this season have come from him as well. And I think with Logan Sargent, it's just got to the point where he was just, really off pace compared to him. And I think the way that they dealt with it was a little bit, you could say, harsh, and a little bit like, all right, mate, there's the door, close it from the other side. And I think
it was about the money he was costing as well, though. I think, like a la Mick Schumacher, if you keep totaling the car, and Williams as well, they were a bit behind in their development. They didn't have a spare chassis, and ironically, it was the time Albon crashed the car that meant Logan couldn't race. But they didn't quite have the logistics and the processes together as a team, quite, did they?
It just never really fell into place for them, did it? I think that was a period in which it seemed like Williams were having a crash every single week, and it does take a big toll in the team. You know what I mean? And I think that was they just had too many obstacles this year, in my opinion.
Yeah, morale, when you know that things are tight back at the factory and HQ, it must really hit hard when you watch the car go into the wall again. James Vowles coming in was a huge coup for the team a few seasons ago. Has he perhaps got to have a little bit more patience then with remolding that team? Because to be so far behind in development, the car was overweight when they were first racing as well. So maybe it's about his expectation that needs to be managed a bit from his Mercedes days.
Yeah, no, 100%. I think he's, in my opinion, he's the right man for the job. He's got that spirit in him that, really wants to take the car out of the hole that they're in to, being a bit more challenging in the midfield, I suppose. And I think, as I say, he's the right man for the job. He's the person that can bring them, from that low a bit higher up. I'm a big fan. I'm a big fan of him.
And were you surprised when one of your alumni, Carlos Sainz, made the decision to go to Williams? I mean, they must have been making the right noises, and he must have had conversations about things such as car development for 2025 and 26, and he must have liked what he heard. Were you surprised by the move?
Yeah, I was actually pretty surprised by the move. Yeah, I was convinced, when as soon as it announced that Hamilton's going to be coming to Ferrari, I suppose the question on everyone's lips at that point was, okay, so where's Carlos Sainz going to go? He's been displaced. Where's he going to end up? And I was convinced. I was thinking in my head, it makes so much sense for either a Mercedes or a Red Bull. With Perez performing the way that he was, and obviously Hamilton going, I was thinking that was just like a done deal. But then, as time went on, I was thinking, oh no, maybe not. And then I had those in talks with Williams, and I was thinking, wow, that is big and bold from Williams, and that obviously means something. These drivers, they know more than we do. They know what's going on behind the scenes. They're in the chats with them to see, what the development's going to be in the next couple of years. So, yeah, he obviously knows something, and it'll be interesting to see how it plays out.
And do you think the arrival of Carlos could aid Alex Albon, who has been carrying that team for some time now as well? It just takes a little bit of pressure off of Alex, doesn't it?
I think it has to, yeah. I think that he's always sort of been bogged down in having a team that's been struggling, almost you could say not having someone that's, pushing him as well to his limits. I think with Formula One drivers, there's something, or in any sport, I suppose, you can even put any sportsman debate in it, even whether it's Messi, Ronaldo. You've always got this competition that pushes you, for someone at your level. And I think that's something that even in Formula One that we need as well, and that the drivers will need, that having to, support Sargent at the beginning of the season must have felt a bit like, he's just going out and he's the star boy. Colapinto might have given a bit of a wake up, but I think Carlos Sainz is really going to be, something that's going to be good for him as well.
And for you, across the season, considering they went down a couple of places in the constructors to P9, underachieve, overachieve, just about right for Williams in 2024, Zane?
It might be a bit harsh, but I'm just going to say, just because of the whole mess that they've had this year, I'm going to have to say underachieving, I'm afraid.
Okay. Well, hopefully they can turn it around at Grove ASAP and we see them back towards the front of the grid with that historic racing name at Williams. Last team on the grid, they finished bottom of the constructors, Sauber, but a shout out to Zhou Guanyu, who scored points in Qatar, which meant that we then saw all teams score points across the 2024 season. But it's a difficult time, isn't it, Zane, for Sauber? They're in transition to the Audi team. We can almost see the lack of investment in the team from the performance of the car. And when I look at Valtteri Bottas, I even think, oh, how serious is anyone about racing? He's making calendars. He's launching alcohol brands. Does that give us an insight into maybe the mentality of the team currently until they transition to Audi?
Yeah, 100%. I think even at some points, you just forget that you forget that they're on the grid. You know what I mean? But yeah, you're definitely right. I think it's literally just a case of they're in the period where they're just waiting for these 2 years to go ahead. They're just going to be having their fun, doing their side missions. Making calendars, beer brands, as you say. Just bide your time, and then if they're really going to be acting like this in these years, we should expect Audi to bring something very interesting to the grid.
And then a familiar face for you towards the latter part of the 2024 season, Mattia Binotto coming in. There was a lot of movement behind the scenes. So Andreas Seidel left McLaren to go and start the Audi transition project, but he's moved aside. But Binotto is a great acquisition for that team because more than 2 decades at Ferrari, I think he was there literally from the ground up all the way through to team principal. So if you're entering F1, that's not a bad character to have leading the line, is it?
100%. I think out of everyone that was available, he's probably, as much as he gives me PTSD from the past couple of years, his last few years at Ferrari, I think, he's definitely the man for the job for me.
So we won't dwell on them too long because of this transition moment they find themselves in. But for you, underachieve, overachieve, or just about right for Sauber, picking up the rear at the bottom of the Constructors' Championship?
Yeah, well, I would say NA, but I'd have to say underachieve. I think everyone would have to.
Yeah, I like the moment you said about we forget they're on the grid. Maybe that was why they put their livery in bright green this season. So at least we could very much see them. But listen, Zane, it's been a fantastic conversation with you. And thank you so much for that insight and your opinions across the constructors grid. And for you guys in the chat box as well, you've been really engaged and we appreciate the support. Just looking at the last few that have come in there. Rachel Menzies is excited about Carlos Sainz reinvigorating Williams, giving them a new lease of life. Great for you, Rachel. Alex doesn't do well under pressure. Look at him at Redbull, according to Lou Bell. Interesting one. Yeah, so if his teammate is someone of a higher caliber, how will he get on? Bottas had the fastest mullet on the grid. Gary Thompson has told us. But of course, part of winning 5 Constructors' Championships at Mercedes. So he's no mug at all, Valtteri Bottas, and has been a great servant to the world of Formula One. 10 career wins as well. So, he's lived his dream and done his thing. And now is handing over to pastures new. But listen, you guys in the chat box, as I said, thank you so much for the engagement. This is the bit now you've probably been hanging around for. So we have got our Revival Racing launch competition, a £100 voucher coming the way of one of you guys, right? So what we're going to do, we're actually going to use a draw for us, and I'm going to bring it up on the screen for you guys now so that you can see that I've not picked out anybody. This is actually going to be done via Lucky Dip. So give me 1 second. Okay, so here we go. Here is your prize draw, everybody. Congratulations to Clarence Smith, who has won. that is interesting to say the least. But well done to Clarence. I'll be in touch. And in fact, you can put your contacts in the comment box for us, Clarence. That would be much appreciated. And you guys, once again, thank you for joining in on this first ever fans forum discussion. I hope you've enjoyed the insight to the world of Formula One. Next Sunday, I'm actually on the road and I'm going to be working in and around the McLaren show car. So I'm hoping I can bring you a few exclusives from that. And then the following week, which is the 16th, we're going to do a preview of the 2025 season. I'm going to get another VIP co-host, and I'm hoping they're as good as Zaniolo.f1. Zane, it's been a pleasure to have you on. Have you enjoyed the experience?
Yeah, no, the pleasure's been all mine. It'd be great to do this again.
Great stuff, buddy. Well, thank you for joining us. Enjoy your evening. Enjoy your morning or your afternoon if you're anywhere else in the world. And you guys in the chat box as well. Enjoy yourself. And we will see you soon at Fans Forum. Thank you so much. Don't forget to subscribe and like as well to aid our progress. Have a good night.
See you guys. Forza Ferrari.